Imagine a world where humans are not the masters of dry land, but instead the kings and queens of the deep. What if our evolution had taken a different path, leading us to become an aquatic species? In this alternative timeline, our civilization would look nothing like the one we know. It would be shaped by water, vast, mysterious, and teeming with life. Let's dive into this intriguing scenario and explore how our bodies, societies, technologies, and even cultures might have evolved if we had become beings of the sea. To understand how we could have evolved into an aquatic species, we first need to look at how evolution works. Over millions of years, natural selection drives gradual adaptations that help a species survive in its environment. In our case, as terrestrial primates, our evolution was influenced by life on land, including challenges like finding food, escaping predators, and adapting to changing climates. But in this aquatic alternative, something changed. Let's go back to our hypothetical starting point. Perhaps a few million years ago, our ancient ancestors, the hominins, may have found themselves in a situation where they spent a lot of time near coastal waters. Some theories suggest that early hominids might have foraged for food in shallow waters over countless generations. What if these water-based behaviors became more than just survival tactics? What if they drove evolutionary changes that made us increasingly suited to aquatic life? In this water world, our bodies would be dramatically different. The first thing you'd notice is that our limbs wouldn't look the same. Legs would likely transform into strong, webbed flippers, with bones becoming denser to help us swim and dive more effectively. Our arms might have evolved to be longer and more flexible, resembling fins that could be used to steer through the water. Skin would be another major change. It could become thicker, smoother, and covered in a layer of blubber, much like dolphins or seals, to retain heat in colder waters. Hair, if we had any left at all, would be minimized, or perhaps we'd have developed an insulating layer of fine, waterproof fur. This adaptation would help with streamlining, reducing drag as we moved through the water. But it's not just about our external appearance. Our internal systems would also undergo profound changes. Lungs would evolve to allow for deep, prolonged diving, perhaps becoming larger and more efficient, capable of extracting oxygen more effectively. We might even develop the ability to store oxygen in our muscles, similar to seals and other diving mammals. And don't forget about vision. Our eyes would likely adapt to see clearly underwater, becoming larger and more capable of detecting movement in dimly lit environments. Imagine a human with large reflective eyes like those of an octopus, able to perceive the subtle shifts in underwater light. And then there's communication. Without air to carry our voices, we'd have to evolve alternative methods. We might rely on echolocation, like dolphins, using clicks and whistles to navigate and communicate. Or we could develop a language of complex body movements and gestures that convey meaning across the currents. With our new bodies, our societies would be just as unique. The ocean isn't uniform. It's filled with various zones, from shallow coral reefs to the deep, dark abyssal plains. This diverse environment would lead to different aquatic biomes where our civilization could develop. Coastal dwellers might live among kelp forests, using underwater caves or coral structures as shelters. Meanwhile, deep-sea communities could build habitats along thermal vents where they harvest geothermal energy. Cities would look nothing like the towering skyscrapers we know. Instead, they'd be sprawling structures of coral-like architecture, grown rather than built. Imagine entire cities made from living organisms, engineered to create vibrant underwater ecosystems that double as human habitation. Instead of streets, we'd have currents, natural highways that transport people and resources. We'd also see a shift in how resources are gathered. Agriculture would take place in underwater farms, cultivating kelp, seaweed, and other aquatic plants. Aquatic species, like fish and mollusks, could be domesticated, providing us with food sources. With such a strong dependence on the ocean's ecosystems, our relationship with nature would be profoundly different. Conservation wouldn't be a moral choice, it would be a basic necessity for survival. Technology, too, would have evolved in a completely different direction. In a world without fire, we wouldn't have metallurgy as we know it. Instead, we'd rely on materials found or harvested in the ocean, like shells, bones, and bioplastics derived from algae. Our tools and weapons would be fashioned from these materials, perhaps designed with organic, flowing shapes that suit the environment. Electricity would still be possible, though. We could harness energy from tidal currents, underwater thermal vents, or even bioluminescent organisms which could serve as natural light sources. Our understanding of chemistry and medicine might be far more advanced in some respects, given the biodiversity of the ocean and the medicinal properties of marine life. And what about communication? Networks of sound waves or light signals could be developed for long-distance communication across the ocean floor, while short-range communication might involve physical gestures or color changes in our skin. Think of how cuttlefish use chromatophores to convey emotions and signals. Being an aquatic species would also shape our cultures, traditions, and worldviews in unique ways. We would develop mythologies centered around the ocean's mysteries, with deities representing various aspects of the sea, from the serene shallows to the perilous deep trenches. The concept of time might be linked to the rhythms of the tides rather than the position of the sun, and our calendar could be based on the lunar cycle, which has a significant effect on the oceans. Art would be dynamic and fluid, with displays of movement through dance or changes in light and color as expressions of creativity. Ceremonies and rituals might involve synchronized swimming or the creation of temporary sculptures from sand and coral that are left to be eroded by the current. Our relationship with life and death would also change. In the sea, decomposition happens quickly, and so our burial practices might involve releasing the body to become part of the food chain once more. We would see ourselves as one small part of a vast, interconnected system, rather than separate from nature. This deeper connection to our environment could foster a society that values sustainability and harmony with nature over exploitation. But not everything would be idyllic. Like any intelligent species, we'd likely have our share of conflict. Territorial disputes could arise over prime underwater locations such as geothermal vents, coral reefs, or fertile kelp forests. However, our methods of warfare would be very different from land-based strategies. Battles might involve tactics like disturbing currents, deploying bioluminescent decoys, or even using sonar to disorient opponents. On the other hand, cooperation would also be vital for survival, particularly in the deep ocean where resources are scarce and dangers abound. In such an interconnected world, empathy and cooperation could become our species' greatest strengths. We'd have to rely on mutual aid and collective strategies to overcome environmental challenges, such as sudden changes in water temperature or threats from large predators. Perhaps this shared experience of life in the ocean would lead to a more unified society, one that understands the need to work together in order to thrive. Ironically, even if we were aquatic beings, there would still be parts of the ocean we could not easily reach. The deep trenches, with their crushing pressures and near-freezing temperatures, would be just as daunting to us as outer space is to land dwellers. We'd have our own version of deep-sea exploration, building advanced submersibles to venture into the uncharted abyss where strange creatures live in darkness. And what about exploring the surface world? For us, the land would be an alien place, dry, inhospitable, and full of dangers. Perhaps our curiosity would drive us to develop specialized suits to allow limited exploration on land, just as we have spacesuits for outer space. We might study terrestrial creatures with the same fascination that we have for marine life in our own reality. So, what if humans had evolved into an aquatic species? It's a world vastly different from the one we know, shaped by the challenges and mysteries of the ocean. We would be creatures who see the world through the rippling lens of water, who move with the currents, and who understand that life is both beautiful and fragile in the deep blue sea. In this alternate timeline, we are not just part of nature. We are immersed in it, living and breathing the very essence of the ocean. Thank you for joining me on this speculative journey beneath the waves. If you enjoyed this deep dive into alternative evolution, be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below about what other what-if scenarios you'd like to explore next.